Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Introduction to Evaluation Part 4, Reporting and Disseminating Information. This is going to cover, this is going to be our final part of the webinar series. This will be covering how to report and disseminate your findings. This will include knowing your target audience, the various vehicles of reporting information, and strengths, limitations of these reportings and dissemination methods. So I am going to pass the mic over to Mr. Eugene Kwan. He is our program evaluator here at CRIB. And so go ahead, Eugene, and take it away.
Hi, thank you for that, Julie. So, are we good to go on the screen?
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen.
I'm sharing it right now. Is it working?
I am not seeing your screen. So put it into presentation mode.
Is it sharing now?
It is now. Go ahead.
Perfect. Awesome. So hi, my name is Eugene, and I am the program evaluator for ACORNS CITE grants. And let's just dive right in. So the overview of this webinar series, this is part 4 of a 4-part series, and we're focusing on disseminating information. And so just in review for the last few weeks, what we've been going over is developing an evaluation plan, collecting data, analyzing data. And so you've kind of gone from collecting information and data into exploring it, analyzing it. And now once you have all this information, the question is now, what do you do with it? And so the big thing is reporting and dissemination, because you could do all this, all the programming and all the data collecting, and if no one knows about it, then it's not very useful. So why is reporting important? So first, it provides information to all your stakeholders. So stakeholders are any persons involved with the project, ranging from participants to program coordinators, evaluators, the funding agencies such as CDC for ACORNS, basically anyone who has ties or is interested in the success of the project. And so providing information to them is a very important part of reporting. Next is, reporting is important because it dictates the future steps of the program. So because of what you're doing, this will inform what you're going to be doing next. Good reporting leads to more funding, and those are things that you want to accomplish throughout the program. Number 3 is increase efficiency and effectiveness of the program. So this kind of just encompasses evaluation as a whole. Being efficient and being effective is part of good evaluation, and reporting your information gives everyone an understanding of what is happening in the project and what actions can be done to make it overall more efficient and effective. So let's focus on data versus information. So data is facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. That means, it could be anything from EHR records, like specifics like height, weight, BMI, all the way to some qualitative information that you collect from a survey or from an interview. Information, however, is processed, organized, or structured facts about something or someone. So in that definition, it is a collection of data. So if you look at the image, we have a bunch of data, all these different kind of data points, and then from there you turn that through analysis into information. And so the next thing is, what do you do with this information? You can just sit on it, I can just stay on your computer, or you can share it to the world. And so information dissemination is the methods one uses to communicate that information. So there are a few questions that you should ask before disseminating information. They include, how can I disseminate this information as accurately as possible? So accurate information stems from strong data and reliable analysis. Basically, if your information needs to be solid, this means using reliable methods of data collection and properly analyzing this information to create accurate information. Next, number 2, how well does the information convey a desired meaning? So you want to make sure that the information that you are sending out to everyone is something that you want to send out to everyone, more or less. It means that the information that you are sending is what your ultimate goal was initially. How much does the received meaning affect outcomes? So what you want is you want to make sure that when you're reporting, the information that you're sharing will help towards your goal. You don't want to have adverse outcomes because of the reporting information. That's not to say you should hide information or anything like that. More so, you want to target your information to be, to move your to reach your desired goals. So going back to number 1, how can I disseminate information as accurately as possible? So that would include mostly strong data and reliable analysis. So strong data right here, you have reliable analysis. Strong data is done by data collection using reliable methods initially when you're collecting data, and then after you have all this data, analyzing it properly using the correct methods, and then creating accurate information. Next, how well does information convey a desired meaning? So you want the information to be engaging and relevant. So essentially, if the participants don't really care about the information that you're sharing, they're most likely are not going to be engaged, and it's not going to really matter to them. You want to make sure that who you're sharing this information to is interested in what you are sharing about. And the third point was, how much does the received information affect outcomes? So this will eventually lead to stakeholder response and engagement. So essentially, you kind of have like a positive momentum thing going, where once you have stakeholders engaged, and then from there you have your program, and then from there it's successful, and you report information about how successful it was, then you can in turn create more positive momentum and have a positive stakeholder response. And in turn, that also leads to more stakeholder engagement. So going back to this little wheel we had, it just kind of goes over stakeholders. At the top, it's the first thing in dark blue. It starts with engaging stakeholders. So when you're first starting a project such as ACORNS, you need to make sure that everyone is kind of on board, that you have initial buy-in. But as you go through the program and focus the evaluation and conduct the program and have all the successes, you want to make sure that you come back full circle and again engage the stakeholders. A lot of the participants will be, they would have had the experience of the program, but then when you have people who are maybe funding agencies who are looking for the successes of the program, they need to receive those reports or that information to ensure future programming, or just to kind of better the program itself and its effectiveness and efficiency. So I found this quote. I don't know who these people are, but I like the quote. It says, "Effective dissemination means getting the right information to the right people at the right time so they can do the right thing." So what that basically means is that you want to have the best information possible, you want to have influential stakeholders, and you want to have the correct timing, and that will all in turn lead to positive change. So when you're thinking about reporting and disseminating your information, you really want to focus on your desired outcomes. What is the goal when you are reporting your information? So just an example, like if you wanted to buy a house, you would want to work backwards. You can't just go out and buy a house, you need to have steps that build up and lead to that. So working backwards, you would possibly go to school, get a job, make money, and then you can buy a house. Another example would be if you wanted to be a professional juggler. You would buy things to juggle, practice juggling, and then work as a juggler. So the big point of this is that when you're thinking about your end goals, you want to make sure that you set those first and then work backwards to figure out what steps you need to take to get to those desired outcomes. So we're just going to go over some information dissemination myths and realities. So if the information is available, stakeholders will access it. That is a myth, yes. So, sorry, going back. If it is available, will they access it? I mean, today, in this day and age, we have the luxury of technology where, with the click of a button, we can share as much information as we want. But just because, a technical report is provided online, that doesn't necessarily mean that stakeholders will access it or, choose to read it. Next, we have if providers understand information, so will users. So understanding, so that's a myth. If providers understand it, so do users. That is not necessarily always true. It can be true at times, but most of the time it isn't. So, for example, if I were to write a technical report that I would maybe share to the CDC, it'd be different from a report summary that I would share to maybe stakeholders. I could share both, but one of them will be more useful, more relevant to the stakeholder. They wouldn't need to read a 30-page report. They could probably get all the information they needed from 1.5 pages of my report summary. And last, if stakeholders have the information, they will use it. And that is also a myth. So just because they have the information does not mean that they will use it. It is important to make sure that you're giving them relevant information that they can use and they would want to use in the future. So just going back over these 2 points, despite information being readily available, not all stakeholders will access or use this information. Information must be delivered in a way that can be understood by all stakeholders. And advanced information or raw data can be delivered selectively. So the main goal of dissemination is getting your data information out to the world. So there are 2 types of dissemination. There's synchronous, which is two-way communication with no time delay and possible real-time responses. So examples of this include conversations that you have with people, presentations, you can have for your boards, telephone calls, door-to-door meetings, whatever, just basically any live interaction. An asynchronous type of dissemination is two-way communication with a time delay, allowing response whenever convenient for the recipient. So an email would be an asynchronous way to kind of communicate with someone, a website with information, a notice, a report, newsletter, media. These are all things that are kind of shared one way. And then if someone else would want to get back to you, there would be a time delay. So there are 4 dissemination core considerations. The first thing I would like to talk about is what kind of information, the type of information that you are sharing. The type of information is understanding what data is most necessary to share. You do not want to share information that is not pertinent to the person. Next, what type of data do stakeholders want to receive? And because there's such a wide variety of stakeholders, from participants to the program coordinators to the funding agency, there's just like a varying level of understanding, and you have to cater to each one of those individuals' needs. And you also have to consider that data is not information. Data is made into information. So just because you have an Excel sheet of just a lot of hard data points doesn't mean that that will be relevant to anyone. Maybe for an evaluator, for an epidemiologist, that would be, or a researcher, that would be great. But for a lay citizen, that might be useless. So you want to make sure that data is made into information that is palpable for all audiences. And most importantly, interesting information is the key to receptiveness. So, interesting information is the best information, and I firmly believe that. If you have something interesting, people will want to hear about it. Conversely, if your information is kind of meh, less people will be inclined to listen. So always make sure to focus on interesting information. So the second consideration is your audience. So taking consideration of who your audience is. So here's a little drawing I made of a girl, and she's asking a squirrel to read a report. That doesn't make sense. You want to make sure you know your audience. So analyze and prepare for who your target audience is. So when I am personally writing a report, I will make sure that I will target it to whoever is reading it. So whether it's my director or if it's for, maybe a participant in a program, those might be two very different reports. Adjust the level of technical information to match your audience. And this is actually something very important. So it can go both ways. Some things that you may need to simplify, to reach a more broader audience, lay citizens who may not have the expertise. But then also you kind of have to do it in the opposite way too, adjusting your level of technical information. Maybe it has to be a higher level of technicality and it needs to be a more detailed report. So this includes more advanced, advanced information that people with maybe a higher education or more background would be able to understand and also utilize better than just like a simple information that would suffice for just a lay person. Understand your audience's ability to access the information. So this is kind of a big deal in the sense that because we work with rural Californians, California Indians, they might not have access to certain luxuries that we have in the cities, and that may hurt how they're getting this information. You want to make sure that how you're sharing your information is an accessible method. Conversely, personally, if someone sent me like a newsletter through the mail, I'd be less inclined to look at it, read it, and understand it versus if someone had just sent me an email or a text message. So understanding your audience's ability to access the information or even desire to access that information is very important. And lastly, cater to demographics. So again, this kind of goes in hand with everything that I said before. Just understanding who you're working with, making sure that it is sensitive toward that demographic, and taking all those considerations. Next, our third core consideration is timing. So you can have all the best information in the world, but if your timing is poor, then it might turn out not to be very productive. So in order to time your dissemination well, you need to develop a loose dissemination plan. So it doesn't have to be rigid, but more so just like developing a plan or having an idea of how you will be disseminating the plan, a timeline essentially of when you'll be disseminating your information. So understanding when the information will be most useful is also very important because, for example, like for the ACORNS grant, we operate in years, year 1 through year 5. It wouldn't be timely to report on year 1, outcomes at the end of year 5. We want to make sure that our reporting is done, periodically and that it is done in a timely manner. So anyone that needs the information, snapshots throughout the years can get that and access that. And chronologically disseminating your information based upon stakeholder involvement. So what that means is that you are disseminating your information based upon who is involved. So it may be more important to share to your funders initially a technical report, and then from there, after that, creating a report summary, and then from there sharing that to various other stakeholders that are engaged, and then from there, maybe releasing, an infographic to the general public about what the progress of the grant was. That would be like a timely and chronological dissemination of your information. In contrast, it wouldn't make sense to create like an infographic of general information and send it out to everyone. And then, for example, if our CDC correspondent was there and they saw that, they'd be like, whoa, where's my report? So you want to make sure that you're sharing your information based upon stakeholder involvement. Maybe, for example, at a tribe, it'd be sharing with the board first, and then from there moving on to all the tribal members, and then from there releasing it out to the general public. And the last core consideration is a vehicle of dissemination. So this is probably the most pertinent and important kind of core consideration. So these are different various, vehicles of dissemination. You have technical reports, report summaries, newsletters, infographics, videos. All these things are used to share information. And so what you want to focus on is using the proper vehicle, using the correct method to share this information. So for example, you have your information guy right here, and you have this vehicle of dissemination. There's no way that this guy is fitting in this car. And so you have to scrap it and bring in something that's more suitable. So this is the proper vehicle for dissemination. So this analogy kind of correlates to if you have certain types of information, it may not be the best method to use, a certain type of vehicle to share that. Let's say, for example, if I had just a very, heavy report that was a lot of text and just a lot of quotes and feedback, then I probably wouldn't choose an infographic to share that information. I'd more likely use a technical report or maybe a podcast to share a success story. And so once you have the proper vehicle, you have informed stakeholders, and everyone's happy. So the focus for ACORNS grantees is these are the vehicles that I would suggest that you focus on. So technical reports, report summaries, infographics, and multimedia. So here's a little comic. Basically what it's saying is you want to make sure that there is an overlap between what you want to say and what they're actually going to listen to. So if we're going to first start with technical reports, how do you write a technical report? Technical reports are the most formal method of disseminating information. It is sometimes it can be very long, sometimes it's a little bit more brief, but essentially it is at the highest level of how you want to share your information. And anyone could read it, but it is often targeted towards people with a better background or higher knowledge of that subject. So again, it's geared towards academics and policymakers and standardized method of disseminating information. So technical reports, regardless of whoever is gonna read them, they must be made. They are the requirement of disseminating information. And oftentimes it is kind of discouraging just because you can write a technical report and it probably won't be read by too many people. It will probably be just a few people that actually read it, and but it might take the most time to create. And it is often published electronically to the public. So a lot of technical reports are shared, and they are put online and accessible to everyone. Often one of the last steps of a program project. So I guess in the timeline of your program or your project, this is kind of like the end, the conclusion. You want to write a technical report to summarize what the program did. So here are just some subsections of technical reports. Commonly include just the basics, the introduction, and you have your introduction, procedures, methods, results, discussions, conclusions. That is like the core, what a technical report must have. When you go into maybe different scientific journals or various other reports, you may include abstracts, table of contents if it's fairly long, list of tables and figures just so it's more organized, background information. And then what I also like to do is the recommendations. I think that is a very important part. So when you're writing a technical report, you have the knowledge, you have the expertise of the program, and you are able to provide your recommendations and your opinions about what can be done to make the program better and more efficient. So here's a little comment. Do you want the detailed analysis you understand, or the executive summary that is dangerously misleading? And I want an executive summary that is not misleading. That is the goal. So making sure that your executive summary is actually, a good reflection of what the technical report would be. So now going into report summaries. what is a report summary? A report summary is a short document produced to summarize a larger report. Essentially, it can be anywhere from 1 to 2 pages. A technical report could be anywhere from 5 to 50 pages. And so it's really condensing that information down without losing a lot of the core information. So it is approximately 5 to 10% of the length of the main report and provides most of the information and pertinent information, but not all. So that means that you won't be able to include all the hard statistics, all the hard data that you would want to usually include, that you would have to include in your technical report. But this is just the bare bones, what you want to say and what you feel like is the most important. And often it is the deciding factor if the reader will engage in reading more information. So if your report summary is interesting enough, talks about something that the reader would be interested in getting more information about, then they will typically also maybe pursue technical report based upon the report summary. In a parallel, if you ever read a scientific journal, an example would be like the abstract. A lot of people can read a lot of abstracts fairly quickly and seeing if this is something that they want to read about, and then from there reading the entire scientific paper. Another example would be like the back of a book. You have this little blurb about what the book is about, and then from there you have an opinion, and then you can decide, is this something that I want to read, or I'm good, and you move on. So report summaries are universal, so you want to make sure that everyone gets a report, at least a report summary. Like, these are things that are fairly easy to make and that you could share to wide audiences, and most of the time a lot of people will be able to understand these reports. So they're made for a broader audience, simplified version of the technical report, much more concise, and reports the most important, interesting information. So when you're writing a report summary, there are different sections. These are the 4 sections that I would typically include in a report summary. So you have your initial summary, which kind of gives you the background information of what was going on. Then you immediately go into the results, what happened. And then from there, recommendations and conclusions. You can kind of sometimes strike the recommendations section and just go straight into conclusions. But I think that it's very important for the reader to really see what future steps are being considered. So these are the steps. You want to compile all necessary information, and this is probably already done once you've been writing your technical report. Find a format template to use to create the summary. So going back to my previous slide, when I had the 4 subsections, that could be a format that you would use to write the report summary. Next, fill out corresponding sections. And then optional, you can stylize with infographics and pertinent media. So it is often nice to have a report summary that is a little bit more colorful, that may show, maybe 1 or 2 infographics or data tables. And this can also just bring in the reader versus just having straight text. So this is actually something that I made for the ACORNS grant. We had our change tool, which was a survey tool that was used in year 1 and year 4 through CDC, and it's called the Community Health and Group Assessment Evaluation. And so what it does is I'm able to just I have my report that I made that was around 12 pages, and then now I just broke it down into just 2, just having all the core information. Next is, why should I use infographics? So infographics are eye-catching, they're more intriguing than reports, easily shared, and increase image and branding. So this is just an example infographic that I found, but immediately it is much more exciting than in comparison to this versus this. Yeah, it's, a lot more people would like to look at the infographic. And in this day and age, when we have so many images and we have, access to, different social media, it is much easier to kind of share in one image versus, sharing a PDF or Word document to people to read. And then from here, you can often get a lot of the information from the, report summary and put it in a concise way as an infographic. Next is multimedia. So why choose multimedia? The use of a variety of artistic or communicative media is what multimedia is. Basically, this includes anything from digital text, photographs, audio files, video presentations, basically anything that is considered, on a digital platform is multimedia. So I would urge you guys to try out maybe one of these methods. These are 3 examples to try for multimedia reporting. One is post a photo and an explanation of the recent work you are conducting on social media. 2, create a success story video on a smartphone or camera and upload the media to social media. Create a website for the duration of a program and update it periodically to include milestones, final results. So these are all 3 ways that you could be reporting information, and it's a lot more exciting than just writing a technical report. So this is just in review. We want to go over steps in disseminating information. So number 1, identify who is receiving the information. Identify a timeline. Decide the reporting format / vehicle of dissemination, and understanding your bottom line. So in review, why do we disseminate information? So it provides information to all stakeholders, dictates the future steps of the program, and again, increases efficiency and effectiveness of the program. What are some considerations before disseminating information? How do I share this information as accurately as possible? So that's going back to having strong data and reliable analysis. How well does this information convey a desired meaning? Getting your ultimate, your bottom line out there. And how much does received information affect outcomes? So stakeholder engagement and deciding future actions of the program. What are the most important factors when disseminating information? So you really want to focus on the type of information that you're sharing, the audience that you're sharing it to, the timeline of how you're sharing the information, and most importantly, the vehicle. So using a vehicle that will cater to and be able to accommodate all 3 things before. So what are the steps in disseminating information? So again, we're going to go over identify who is receiving the information, identify a timeline, decide the reporting format vehicle, and understanding the bottom line. The bottom line is essentially when we started from, what we want, what our desired outcome is, and working backwards from there. And so these are, I think, that the 4 things that you really should take into consideration when you are trying to share your information. Alrighty, so thank you for participating in this webinar series. This is the final part 4, reporting and dissemination methods. If you have any questions, please let me know. Our emails are provided right here. I'm the evaluator for the ACORNS grant, and if you do have any epidemiology related questions or questions related to part 2 and 3 of the series, please feel free to also reach out to Michael Mudgett.
That was a great presentation. All right, so I am going to stop recording.